Alright, then after that it'll be time to stitch up our casing. So what you can do is, after you have made your buttonholes, now you can take the other side of the casing and put it right back on that fold. Next we're going to do 3 rows of stitching along our waistband to create the casings. To help keep your waistband steady as you're sewing, one thing that I like to do, even though we made that crease along the top, there can still be some shifting and moving along the waistband. So to get the most accurate sew, I like to take some pins and just about maybe 2 inches down first. I mean, you can adjust these pins later as needed. I just like to put some pins to just hold it in place. So I make sure it's nice and smooth at the fold there, and then just add pins to hold the waistband down. Alright, so another tip to hold this nice and straight in place at the side seam, go ahead and line it up. Now I have turned it to the wrong side facing out, and I'm going to place a pin there. And then also where my pocket is, I know we put one earlier to baste it in place, but you can also add another pin where the waistband meets the pocket. You can place another pin there. So that's another thing that you can do. Also on the other side seam to hold it nice in place, so when you get ready to sew, you have your pockets are facing the right direction. Your seam is nicely lined up on the side so that you get a nice clean waistband. Alright, so I'm starting off in the center back area of the waistband, so the back pattern piece. And what I went ahead and did was I marked a starting pin and a stopping pin. So we need to leave an opening because we need to get all of our elastic through and our drawstring through. So we're going to be leaving this area open. So we're going to start here and then stop when we get there. So the first thing that you want to do is line up the fold of the casing with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I have my needle lined up with my starting pin. So let me remove that. Now go ahead and lower your needle, begin sewing, and back stitch. And you want to continue sewing until you reach your stopping pin. Alright, back at I'm at my stopping point, so I'm going to back stitch. And maybe I forgot to mention, this area that I left open here is about 1.5 inches or so. Alright, so the next thing that we need to do is measure over 1 3/4 of an inch from our needle over. So you may or may not have that marking already on the plate of your sewing machine, but if not, take a measuring tape, ruler, and then from your needle you want to measure over 1 3/4 of an inch. I went ahead and place my tape, because now this is going to be my seam guide for my casing. Still on the center back, I went ahead and put my starting and my stopping pins back on because we're leaving that same area open. Now I'm going to take the fold of my casing and I'm going to line it up with that 1 3/4 of an inch mark. All right, so now I'm going to repeat the same process that I did up above, lowering my needle. I'm going to begin sewing, back stitching, and then when I get to this stopping pin up here, this stopping pin over here, I'm going to stop. Alright, once you get back to the stopping pin, back stitch. Alright, so now you need to readjust your painter's tape again. So from your needle, you want to measure over 2 3/8 of an inch, and then you want to place your blue tape, your painter's tape. Alright, so I went ahead and readjusted my starting and my stopping pin so that it's lower down on my casing. So I'm lining up the fold of my casing with the 2 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Going to my starting pin. And I'm going to repeat that process. Lowering my needle, begin sewing, back stitch, and stopping once we get to our stopping pin. Alright, when you get to the stopping pin, back stitch. Alright, and now for your final row, go ahead and move your painter's tape over to 3.5 inches. Alright, I still have my same starting and stopping point. I just moved my pins down a little bit lower. I'm taking the top edge of the casing now and lining it up with that 3.5 inch mark that we made. Starting at my starting pin. Lower your needle, begin sewing, back stitch, and you're going to continue sewing until you get to the end, and you're going to back stitch again. Alright, make sure when you get to your pocket area that it's nice and flat, and that you have your pocket is under the casing and not sitting on top of the casing. Alright, when you get to your stopping pin, back stitch. Alright, and now you should have some beautiful lines of stitching thanks to our painter's tape. So now we can go ahead and insert our elastic and our drawstring. Alright, next you need to cut out your elastic. So for the 1 inch pieces, you're going to need 2, and for the 1/2 inch elastic, you just need 1 piece. So what you want to do is cut out a piece that is your waist measurement minus 1 inch. Alright, to keep your safety pin from opening while you're inserting it through your casing, go ahead and around the end, go ahead and wrap some painter's tape. That way you won't accidentally pinch the safety pin open and it just becomes a hassle. So please use this tip, or else you're going to be struggling like I was. Alright, now come to the center back where we left those openings. Grab your safety pin, place it at one end of your elastic. So we're starting with the 1/2 inch piece. Go ahead and now insert it through the opening. Bring it all the way up. Alright, and now I'm at the top casing. So now I'm going to start feeding my elastic through. So I'm pushing with my right hand, holding, and then pulling in the opposite direction. So I'm pushing and pulling. Now you don't want the other piece of your elastic to come through. So what you need to do is take your safety pin, take the other end of the elastic, and pin it to the casing. Alright, once you get back to that opening, go ahead now and bring it down and out. Then you can remove that safety pin off the other end. Okay, now make sure that your elastic hasn't twisted. Like I could see mine has twisted right here. So I'm going to fix that. Making sure I'm just feeling around, making sure that it's nice and straight. Alright, now you can overlap the elastic and place a pin. So I'm overlapping it about 1/2 inch, and then I'm pinning. Alright, turn your sewing machine to a zigzag stitch, then go ahead and lower your needle and begin sewing and back stitch. So forward and back stitch. So forward and then back stitch one more time. Alright, now you can go ahead and push this elastic up inside the casing. Grab a pin, and what you want to do, right where that opening is, take the pin and pin your elastic to the fabric and do it close to the top. Alright, now we need to stitch this opening closed. So turn your stitch back to a straight stitch. And I'm going to pick up right where I left off here, and then I'm going to sew down. So if it's easier for you, you can take your fabric marking tool and mark it to close it to give you a guide on how to stitch. So that might be helpful for some of you. So go ahead and begin sewing, back stitch, and make sure that you're not stitching on top of that elastic. Alright, once you get back to the other end, back stitch. Alright, we're going to repeat that process for the 1-inch elastic. So this time I'm going to use my bigger safety pin, placing it on the end, and I'm going to push it up through that opening. And now I'm coming to my second row casing. Alright, and you want to continue pushing and pulling. Pushing and pulling. All right, now this row is going to be a little bit more challenging because it's already gathered at the top. So you're really going to have to use your hand muscles, give it everything you got. If you need to take a break and, you know, flex those hand muscles, you know, if your hands start aching, it's okay. Just exercise them really quickly, loosen them up, and keep going. But give it all you got. Use all your strength to get this elastic through. So push it and pull. You can even move the ones at the top too. As you're pulling in the opposite direction, use this other hand to move those ones at the top. Move all those gathers out your way so you can push this elastic through. Or even if you need to move them the other way too to get them out of your way, you can, to loosen it up. But make sure you hold tight to that piece of elastic though. Alright, so keep pushing through. Yes, push through. Stay strong and meet me on the other side. And we'll bring it out just like we did the top one. So keep on going. Also, don't forget to safety pin the end of your elastic to your casing so that you don't pull it out. Alright, once you get back to that opening, bring it on down. And you could even put your finger up there to help guide it out. Okay, you can take off the other safety pin. Make sure that it hasn't twisted. So take your hand and just feel. Alright, now take the ends, overlap 1/2 inch. Pin it in place, and now we will sew a zigzag stitch to hold this. Alright, go ahead and change your machine to a zigzag stitch. Begin sewing. And back stitch. Sew forward again. And back stitch. Sew forward one more time. And back stitch one last time. Alright, and then go ahead and pull your skirt in opposite directions so that your elastic goes inside of the skirt. Push it up in there also to help it out. Alright, go ahead and push your elastic up towards this seam and then pin it out of your way so that you don't stitch on top of it. Now take your needle, line it up where you left off, back stitch, and keep sewing until you get to the other end. And then back stitch. Alright, while we're here, we are also going to stitch up the third row of stitches, right? 1, 2, 3, yeah, our third row, because we're going to insert our drawstring through the buttonholes. So you can go ahead and close up this area. Alright, grab your drawstring, grab a safety pin, place it at one end of the drawstring, Now find your buttonholes, place it through one of them, and begin feeding it through just like the elastic. So just like when we're pushing the elastic through, you want to move everything out of your way as you're pushing it through. Really use those hand muscles. You're going to have some strong hands after this. Now, when you get to the side seam, it might be a little tricky, so what I like to do is kind of pinch the side seam so that it gets past the bulk in that area, but keep going. You just have to wiggle your way through because it might get caught, so I just like to pinch it open to kind of separate that fabric, and then I push the safety pin through. Alright, when you get the safety pin through the other loop, you can take it off. And then just kind of pull so you can get it through a little bit longer. Pull it in the opposite direction and pull. Alright, so eventually you'll get it nice and centered. And then what I like to do is tie some knots at the end. So I just tie it. The knot. Again, on the other one, just tying the knot. And then I just like to snip close to that. Alright, now the last thing that you're going to do is at your center back, you're going to insert your last piece of 1 inch elastic the same way we did the other pieces of elastic. Now I'm not going to demonstrate that on camera. If you have to rewind the video, rewind. But I insert it the same exact way and close up the opening, the last opening, the same exact way. Alright, now to hem your skirt, I'm looking at the wrong side of the fabric, it's facing up. Take an index card or your seam gauge and you want to press it up 1 inch. So if you like just using one piece, you can cut out a 1 inch piece and fold it up in there, or you can take another index card and measure up to make a 1 inch mark and fold it up to meet that 1 inch line. Now I finished off my raw edge with my serger, so I'm just going to leave it like this and do a top stitch. But if you do not finish off your raw edge, what you can do is open it up, fold the raw edge to meet that crease, and then fold in again to hide the raw edge inside, so you can create a narrow hem, whichever one you prefer. Alright, to sew up the hem, you have two options. So if you were someone who did a narrow hem, that means you tucked the raw edge on the inside, you are going to line up the edge of your hem with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And if you did not, if you did it like me and you just turned it up one time because you finished off the raw edge, then you can line up your hem with 3/4 of an inch seam allowance. So lower your needle, go ahead and begin sewing, back stitch, and you're going to continue sewing until you get back to your starting point. All right, once you're all finished back at your starting point, go ahead and take this to your iron, give it a nice press, give the whole skirt a nice press, and you are all finished.